You are listening to Education Through Music, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Noah, and it is my honor to bring you a panel discussion on modern band with four dynamic music educators with decades of experience between them. They are Dr. Scott Burstein, Dr. Tom Zlabinger, Alfredo Hernandez, and Dr. Joe DeMarco. I'll let them introduce themselves presently.
My name is Dr. Scott Burstein. I am the Director of Professional Development in Higher Education with the nonprofit Music Will.
My name is Dr. Tom Zlabinger. I'm Associate Professor of Music at York College in Jamaica, Queens. That's one of the CUNY campuses. I also serve as the president of MEANYC, the Music Educators Association of New York City, which is an association that supports teachers all throughout the city and also students. We run two festivals, one for middle school and one for high school, to feature these honor students, and then we support teachers in their work.
I'm Alfredo Hernandez. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. I am currently the music director over at All Hallows High School. It is a Catholic school up in the Bronx. I'm like a block and a half away from Yankee Stadium.
I'm Joe DeMarco. This is my third year teaching in Northern Queens, Middle School 419, otherwise known as the Tommy L. Agee Educational Facility, who was one of the 1969 Miracle Mets. And Alfredo's a block and a half away from Yankee Stadium. I'm actually a block and a half away from Citi Field. So that's pretty cool.
Let's go ahead and take turns answering this first question of what drew you to teaching music, and in particular, teaching modern band. Scott, do you want to go first?
To be honest, I didn't start off thinking I wanted to be a music teacher. I didn't take any education courses. I literally fell into teaching while I was waiting to hear back from law schools. Ran into my old band director on the beach playing volleyball, and he said, "Hey, there's a job open. You got nothing to do this year." And did it for a year and loved it. And I think that my experience is pretty unique because when I got to school, because I hadn't done any background in education, I was on an emergency credential. I didn't realize there were like things you were supposed to do. So I just was like, I'm a guitar player. I've done other kinds of music for sure, but I'm like, I want to make sure I have a guitar class, and that turned into a modern band. So in the 12 years I taught, I did teach concert band and marching band and all those other kinds of ensembles. But, the guitar program, which turned into the modern band program, just grew and grew and, went from 20 kids and a couple guitars and chairing to eventually having about 100 guitars in my classroom and about, 250 kids signed up for the class and kids waiting and, the drum kit, and we had full audio. It was great. It was really an exciting thing to be able to use to impact my program. And I found that a lot of those students then eventually went on to join all the other classes. It was, half my marching band were kids that started in my guitar class. So it was pretty exciting and fun. And I'm glad that now I've managed to turn this into my current job, which is getting to train other teachers to teach modern band, which I've done now for the last 12 to 13 years.
I always wanted to teach. I knew that. I think I went into high school thinking I was going to teach history at one point, and then I along the way I just realized I'm like, I like music a little bit more than than my classmates, and yeah, I cut out lunch from my schedule altogether to have two music classes. I had to get like my parents' signature to approve that. That's how dedicated I was at the beginning. What led me to teach modern band was based off what we had. We're Catholic school, not not the hugest school, and we just had to make do with whatever instruments we had available. And I think modern band just fit the footprint of the school so well, and it really took off. And we're in our third year, and I feel like it's the flagship course and group over from at the school.
So, I'll be honest, I never really thought that I was going to be a public school teacher. I always toyed around with the possibility. But it wasn't my ultimate goal. I went the more performance route throughout college. I went to school to play drums, to play percussion. And I did the whole get your bachelor's, get your master's, get your doctorate, hopefully get a job teaching at a university. So that was kind of, the path that I saw for myself. But what no one tells you is, there's not really a whole lot to choose from right after you get your doctorate. That's the great thing about ETM too. They take people who don't necessarily have all the proper credentials to jump into a public school teaching situation, and they give you that platform to find your strengths and see how you do in that situation and see if you can really grow as an educator in that way. And for me, that's exactly my story. I took the job with ETM. This is my first placement, and yeah, everything's going great. I got the rock band club going. The kids are stoked, and yeah, it's been pretty cool so far.
In full disclosure, I'm second generation educator. Both my parents were teachers, or they're still alive. My father was a college professor, and my mother was a high school English teacher. So I've always been surrounded by teaching, but not teaching music. Music was always a part of my life. I was wiggling, as an infant. I was given piano lessons when I was 3, but I had a little bit of a bumpy road because I didn't stay on the same instrument for very long, and finally I found the bass, and bass felt like home. And so I went to school for bass. I got a master's at Queens College, and then I got a doctorate in ethnomusicology. And then I landed basically what I thought was my dream job at the time, was teaching jazz at York College. And I was very happy leading 2 big bands and teaching jazz history and all that sort of stuff. And then things changed. During the pandemic, I had time to reflect on what I was doing, and more importantly, what I was not doing. Was I serving our students at York College the best I could? And then I found APME, the Association for the Popular Music Education, and by extension, the Modern Band Summit. And I was given the language and the peoples to really focus in on what I should be doing. And we shifted from a jazz-centered curriculum to a modern band curriculum. So that's why I got into modern band, out of student need.
So cool that it's been such a recent thing too. 4 years ago is when a lot of things kind of changed in education out of necessity, but some really cool things have happened as a result of that necessity as well. What are some of the challenges of teaching music in New York City schools in particular, and what tools does modern band offer for addressing them? I think that dovetails nicely with what Tom was saying about recognizing the need, and sort of seeing how APME and the summit sort of offered the tools and brought the tools into a context in which it could be acceptable in an academic setting to make these changes.
I would say the fight for constant engagement, the fight for how do I make this fun for people that maybe don't even want to be in this room right now, and trying to find. I've found that you try to be the teacher that the world expects you to be, and you try and you fail, you edit, you try, you fail, you edit, et cetera, et cetera. You just kind of go that route for a little while. But I think the biggest thing was don't fight the kids. Don't push back. Don't try to meet them here and then go this way. Try to see where they're going, see what their interests are, and just kind of like plod along that path there. You can eventually find out where they're going, and you can see what musical interests they have. And they're listening to plenty of music. There's plenty to learn from the music that they're currently listening to. I've found that as soon as I started, kind of going that direction, I started having a lot more success. The classroom started being a lot more chill. You have a lot more opportunities to, form, kind of relationships with these people, to figure out where they're going and how can you guide them in kind of a cool direction. Modern bands specifically, I mean, dude, I remember I remember when I was in middle school, I got my first drum kit when I was in the 6th grade. I wanted to be Keith Moon. I got my hair cut like him. I idolized these people. And, I didn't have that classical musical upbringing. And the kids that we see these days, for the most part, largely are not going to have that typical, musical upbringing of, they already come into middle school having a bunch of music lessons and a main instrument. You know what I mean? So like, how am I going to convince this kid that, the importance of classical music? And it's obviously it's very important to our culture and what we are, who we are, what we do. But how am I going to be like, no, you need to do this because it's important? No, they want to rock, right? I wanted to rock. Like we're very similar in that regard. I was just like, well, let me come here and play to my strengths. Let me see what I can do. This is what I know. Let me just go full bore into this and see what happens. And I've seen a lot of success just kind of trying to, take it step by step and just kind of go that direction with it.
Speaking kind of towards that thought, and I can't speak exactly to New York. I'm not in New York. I haven't taught in New York. I was from Los Angeles. But, we work with teachers nationwide, and I think that the deeper we've gone into the whole modern band movement, I think we found a lot of things that we could recognize from our own childhood. Joe, I'm similar to you. Like I got a guitar and wanted to play Guns N' Roses, and went to my middle school teacher and told him that, and he said, "Nope, not here." And the only reason I got involved in music at all was I joined the marching band to avoid doing the mile, to avoid physical activity, because I didn't have to do PE if I did marching band. And it's just kind of silly looking back on it now. I think that, one of the things that we find though, is that, at least in my program, the kids, they became like me, where the more music they learned, the more music they wanted to learn. If we started at a place of what they bring into the classroom, they get excited about other things. I think that, like my absolute favorite is Bach. I'm a huge jazz Bach guy. I love playing Bach's music, listening to it, whatever. And if in my first guitar lesson at 12 years old, my teacher sat me down and said, "Check out this really cool piece by Bach," I would have quit immediately and wouldn't like Bach now. So, growth happens. And I think that, kind of touching into one of the other things you mentioned, which is really, really the key here, is there is so much depth to all music, right? We've chosen that some parts of music are valuable if you're looking from a Western art tradition, but there's the production value, the way that they're using sounds, instrumentation and timbres are very different. Like there's any piece of music I can make into a great lesson if I do the work and learn it. But oftentimes what we do is we start and we say, we've done all this studying ourselves, and now we're going to have these kids and we're going to make them learn what we know, instead of us taking what they know and finding good lessons to make them better musicians with that as a starting point. And I think that a lot of times that's where we find some of the challenges in the classroom, are teachers that recognize this, but don't know where to begin, don't know how to do that. They're not pop musicians necessarily.
I couldn't agree with what you're saying more. It's so amazing to work with students and meet them where they are and trust them. And our pedagogy systems are not built for that yet. It's changing. It's slowly changing. And I say this as a good ethnomusicologist. There are traditions like classical music and jazz, large ensemble jazz, where we have the score that can be conducted. We know what instrumentation needs to be on the stage, et cetera, with choirs too, and wind ensembles. And because rock and pop are so new, they haven't had a chance to marinate and create a pedagogy. And we've adopted pedagogies from other spaces to try to teach pop and rock. And some of it works, but a lot of it doesn't. And I think it's an exciting time as we develop these new pedagogies of how to convey what we know to these younger musicians in a meaningful way, and not just a very simplistic way, but a very advanced way, so they can play things like Stairway to Heaven, that they can really get into the stuff. And all those students, even though they've not had a lesson, have some relationship with music. right? They have, and maybe wildly different than ours. That they don't have a main instrument and they don't read music maybe, but they have a deep relationship. In some ways, they may have a deeper relationship than we do. So yes, we need to be eternal students and continue to learn from who we are teaching. But we also want to be able to give them things that are going to make them more themselves and activate them in a way so they can reach the goals that they want to reach. And I'll just give you a quick example. Since the pandemic, instead of me saying, "Oh, we're going to do this show, we're going to do like a Dizzy Gillespie or a Stevie Wonder show," every first rehearsal I asked my students, "What do you want to play?" And it was a big, big trust exercise the first time I did it. I'd never had that. I never had a teacher come up and say, "What do you want to do?" And they love it. "Oh, let's do this tune. Let's do this tune." So I just, pull up my laptop and start writing down the name of tunes. And if I don't know the tunes, I write the artist's name. And I collect, 4 or 5 tunes from the students that I then whittle around and turn it back and suggest, well, we could make this tune sound good with the people in the room. This is a little too advanced. Or maybe we could shake this up and we do, it's more, you've heard this phrase before, it's more guide on the side instead of sage on the stage. And it's just amazing. The music making at York College since the pandemic has been transformed because we've put the students maybe not in the driver's seat, but they're at least they're not sitting in the back anymore. We're not dragging them forward. They're saying, let's go here, let's go here. I know a shorter way, and they'll help them. But then they'll find new destinations that you are so thrilled to get to. Some tunes that we've done I would have never heard of. And you're still teaching the fundamentals. You're still teaching harmony, melody, rhythm, timbre. All this stuff is still being taught.
I want to add to that because I'm like, you kind of like light that fuse for a lot of students. Like when they, I think my favorite thing is seeing them like reverse engineer stuff they've learned. Like they come in, like you said, playing Stairway to Heaven. I'm like, you know what you're playing? And then like when we get down the line, they've realized I've been playing music theory all along. I just didn't know how to communicate that. I think like just recently I had 2 Hispanic students. They were in lieu of their midterm, they decided to perform for our winter concert. And it turns out that they had been performing at like car meets, Mexican Reggaeton music. And the kid could play acoustic guitar really well. And the other kid slapping acoustic bass. And I'm like, let me just hear what you're playing. Cause I'm like, I don't listen to that music. Let me see what it is exactly you're doing. And he's like, oh, I don't know what chords I'm playing. I'm just hitting these areas of the guitar. And it was amazing to just see them get up on stage and perform it. And then kind of like, even now they're just coming in during lunch and rehearsing because they have the bug to perform now in front of people. But yeah, no, it's, and I gave them that space to perform music they want to perform. Yeah, I don't know. I can't tell you how many kids are turned away in New York from like thinking that music is this like stuffy, I have to learn these traditional songs that I don't hear outside of the classroom. I have kids coming in saying, hey, my dad said we should play this song because they heard that we're doing music like this. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, it's just anything you could do to, keep that foot on the pedal for them is great.
There's something a lot more impactful about students recognizing that they are in need of a word to describe something that they're already using, that they've already sort of embodied, but they need a word for it. And then you can offer them a word from your own musical background. That, I think, sinks in a lot deeper than if you start with, here's a word, here's a definition.
Yeah, I was going to say, instead of talking about word definitions, I would talk about word spellings, right? They play these scales and you give them names, or chords and you give them names. And we learned to speak before we learned to write, right? We all did that. So why are we talking about things like theory and or teaching them to read before we let them really, really play? So as long as we can fulfill that, need and fuel that desire to just play and play and play, they'll ask some of the greatest questions.
I think we've already sort of gotten into a little bit of general success stories from classrooms, but do we have some specific success stories that we want to share from classrooms?
In my, placement in my school at 419, I realized pretty quickly it was going to be show, don't ask sort of thing to get what I need, to get what I want for my program. Because I remember going to admin and being like, this is something I want to do. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool that you want to do that. Cool. And and so in the beginning we didn't really have a whole lot. I had a bunch of buckets, and so I started like a 15-minute lunch club where I would go down and pick up some kids that were super interested from the class time we had together, and I just put together like a bucket drumming ensemble, and we played an awesome show at the tail end of the year. And then the next year it was like, all right, well, you get a bucket drumming club. And then I got an hour after school for that. And then I was like, okay, well, now let's really see what I can do. Hey guys, I want to do a rock band club. Okay, sweet. That sounds expensive, right? And so I had to jump through a bunch of hoops, and I had to do some extra stuff. Finally got my hands on a drum kit, got one bass, one guitar, one piano. But I didn't really have a whole lot of time to like get this thing together. So I had a really strong class, and I was like, all right, you, we're going to form a band. And, here's some songs that you can easily put together. And they were like, cool, we want to do this one. I was like, sweet. And then at the end of the year, I was like, hey, I put together this rock band. We're doing this Festival of the Arts. Let's have them play. They played, they killed it. And then today it's like, all right, well, you get a 2-hour club and anything you want. Give us a list of whatever you need. And so now I've got the whole setup. The next step now is getting enough gear for an entire classroom. So I recently just spoke to my principal about getting like 35 nylon string acoustic guitars, so I can actually start like a class-based full class like guitar modern band sort of situation here. But at the moment we got 3 basses, 4 electric guitars, we got a few keyboards, still only 1 drum set. We have a couple electrics coming in the way. And I put together this rock band club that's 2 hours every Monday. And here's a win. 70 kids signed up like right away. And what was sad about that was I can't facilitate 70 kids in 2 hours, like, dude, I have 1 drum set, so I was, I had to tell a lot of people like, let me see if I can get another day. At this rate, I'm going to need like an after school club every single day. Let me see if I can get another day. Let me see if I can get more gear. I have kids asking me every single day, like, hey, what's the deal with that? What's the deal with that? Like, working on it. It takes a while to get things. Anyway, besides the point, that's a huge win to have that many kids be like, I want to do this. But it's also sad to say, okay, well, some of us are going to have to wait. Yeah, some of us are gonna have to wait. It's too bad about that.
Once you have 70, then and you can do 70, you're gonna have 140.
Yeah, totally. And that's just how it's gonna be. But that's awesome. Whenever these kids ask, they love asking the question, are we gonna perform for these people? Are we gonna perform for all the grades? Are we gonna perform for parents? Are we gonna take a trip and go perform in Manhattan? And every single time I say yes, because the answer is yes to all that stuff, they're stoked. They're smiling, twinkle in the eye, the whole deal, so like it's easy to be nervous about performing for people, but once they get one cool performance as a rock band under their belt, it's like, let's keep doing this. And I'm like, you guys are going to be very busy.
Yeah. Well, and the performances are so different too. Like just to kind of tie that into one of the vignettes I was thinking about, like, like you start performing, I'll get my concert band out there and I'll have, 50 parents struggle to sit through a set of some of my favorite music. We're going to do Holst 2, guys. Here we go. And then the second I have kids on stage that are playing, Red Hot Chili Peppers. We're from California. That's like, it's illegal to not play the Chili Peppers, or like Metallica or whatever. And the parents are like so excited. And actually, one of the best things we started doing is we started doing kind of like a battle of the bands where I'd have like 10 of the different groups in the classroom or out of the classroom come and play. And it was packed. It was, the first year we were like, all right, everyone can come for free. Next year we're charging admission. And we kept doubling it.
Right.
We got to the point, I was very proud of the fact that we got to the point where we were, our principal okayed us having a mosh pit. And we literally had a slam pit in our auditorium. And I told them it would be fine, and it was fine. And the school police were like, I can't believe this worked out so well. We were free to do things like make sure kids are being safe. And, but then my principal gave me the best compliment I've ever had. It was she didn't give me very many, but at this one, she said, like, we need to find more people that can do what Scott does with the modern band program. Those are kids that aren't going to join any of the clubs at school. Mm-hmm. They're not going to school dances. They're not going to the football game. They're the kids that are failing many of their classes and are in danger of dropping out. And they all show up to go to these concerts, and they all show up to be in his class and are doing well there. Like, it speaks to them. So I think that's like a really important feature, is that, it really changes the community, it changes the parents, it changes, the school notices, the administration. And the last quick thing I'll say is, so for my dissertation, I did a study of students 10 years after graduating from my program. And it was a specific class I did that was this modern band with 40 kids. And it was really unique how we had the class, because I broke them into 8 groups, and every 5 weeks they'd have to perform 2 songs. And then they'd switch bands, and they couldn't perform with the same people twice. We did different genres of music each time. They chose the songs. They had to do everything. And it was super fun and really engaging. And it was really unique. We, our final project, they performed at the Whiskey A Go Go on Sunset Strip here. And like, they had to book it. They had to sell the tickets. They had to get a bus to get people there if they wanted an audience. It was great. But when I interviewed them 10 years later, the thing that I didn't realize that was super engaging was, like, my class was filled with 2 types of kids. There was definitely the guitar kid, right? These kids are failing a lot of classes. They're kind of social outcasts. They're, most of them, playing in, progressive death metal bands in their spare time in downtown LA.
That's my stuff right there.
Right, exactly. And there was tons of kids that were into that. And then you had all these kids, many of them that were in their foreign language magnet from the school. Many of them were AP students doing really well. So it's a split. These kids that were like the popular, smart, doing really well, societally, like school smart kind of stuff. And they talked about, one of the students specifically talked about the fact that she went in there thinking, wow, I'm here with all these guys I'm kind of scared of. They don't do well. And like, within a couple of weeks, every one of those AP kids are looking up to those other kids. Mm-hmm. They become the coolest kids in class. They were asking them where their gigs were and showing up to their gigs on weekend. And it was a complete cultural juxtaposition of what happened. These honors and AP kids, all of a sudden they didn't know what to do. They couldn't lead the instruction, because they're like, just give me some paper I can read and play what's on the page. And the other kids are like, no, here's how we do things. And they led it, and they put it together, and they all got along so well. They're all still friends. So I thought that was like a really unique thing. There's a place for everybody. When you're doing it and you're listening to what they want, what their needs are, there's a place for them. Rather than turning kids away that are, like, in 9th grade, I didn't get music instruction, what can I be? And they're like, well, sorry, there's no room for you in the music program at the school,
Yeah, that's huge, because I come from that. So I grew up in New York, where, like, I didn't have music class until high school, and even then it was like the beginning of a music program. So I all the music came from the Essential Elements books. And when I got to college and I started doing music in college, I remember how jarring it was to, like, get a jazz standard put in front of you and all the kids are excited to play it. And I'm like, I've never heard this song in my life. I don't. So, like, giving them the head start in a way that isn't necessarily like drilling something into their head that they don't listen to naturally. I think, like, it's been a pleasure for me. I have kids who graduated. My inaugural modern band graduated last May. And like 2 of them have gone to major. They're majored in music upstate. I forget the colleges, but like, they'll write me messages about how their guitar lessons are going, or what new scales they're practicing, and how their jazz combo is going. And I'm like, that I think that's my success story. So my inaugural band, we started at 3 years ago, and they graduated last year. But they had done so much for our school and for education and music that I knew, like, halfway through, I'm like, this has to keep going after this. And we were able to raise funds to send the 10 members of the inaugural band with their own guitars and basses and drum sets, like solid instruments that, because they got to the point, I think, halfway through the first year where they outgrew those first act guitars that, cut your hands when you slide down the fretboard. Now you see them walking around with their gig bags and their practice guitars. It's great. I think that's what, I did a lot with that. My group, we went on tour of middle schools. We performed a couple times in some cool places. Tom got to see them over at the World Trade Center. They're performers, you know?
And once you get that engagement, that engagement becomes ownership, right? These students are doing things they want to do, and those students who are telling those other students, oh, this is how we do it, they get to be the person who has the wisdom, right? Yeah. They get to be the expert, right? And so that's a nice thing for them, and it's also a nice thing for the other students who are humble enough to ask for help, right? And it's something that they're, it's not written on a page. You're going to be okay. We're still going to make sound. And I love when we see students really take the music and push it inside themselves. And it becomes, instead of it being on a sheet of music on a music stand, and they're like, it's coming. They're shining almost. The stuff is just shining out of them, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
We've talked about some of the advantages that starting a modern band program will offer in a given setting, but what are some of the challenges in starting this kind of program, and what advice would you offer to teachers who are thinking of doing the same thing?
I think it's a lot like what Joe talked about at the beginning. It's like music, especially in New York City, is like considered that break for every other teacher. Like there's a big fight to legitimize music class, and then you throw in pop music or rock music that isn't considered, it's not considered this stuffy thing, right away you get looks, right? When they hear that you're doing music that's not considered like very educational. So at the beginning of it, I feel like it's like it's a 50-50, right? Like if you start this program and you don't make headway at a decent enough speed, you could lose all traction, like if Joe didn't do such a good job of his group, he didn't get that hookup from his school, same thing for me. I tried to move as fast as I could as soon as I started that group, donated a lot of my time to just ensure the success, because I knew if I didn't do that, it would just be another after school club that kind of just got waved off.
Yeah. The student engagement is oxygen. That's what keeps things going. And so that's going to change. What the students are into is going to change sometimes very quickly. Mm-hmm. And you can't just rely on Beethoven and Duke Ellington, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're going to do it right, if you're going to make this stuff, dare I say, sexy, if you're going to make it have mojo, to me, it all starts with the drums. You don't want to be like, yeah, we've got modern band and it sounds like poo, right? So, one of the challenges for me is getting drummers up to speed and getting them locked into that backbeat, right? Getting because that getting that just that glorious thing that we all love going, and then you can build that stuff on top of it. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm hypersensitive to it as a bass player, but people in the audience are going to know if the stuff doesn't feel right. And so we're talking more about feel than anything. Mm-hmm. And getting our students to talk about music that way is not that hard. How does it feel? Oh, it feels good. It feels weak. It feels strong. But to translate that into actionable items, if you will, like, okay, what do we need to fix? That's when we come in. Those of us who've been doing this for a long time. Well, we need to fix that there. We need to fix that there. We need to fix that there. And then you tweak it, and it slowly rises over time. But developing that foundation to build on, to me, is the hardest thing. Otherwise, it's just always wobbly, or it falls back down. And so I spent a lot of time working with our drummers to give us the rails of the train.
Something I do often is I actually open with these questions of like, how does it feel? Okay, and they'll tell you, they'll give you the correct answer, and we'll say, okay, well, I'll be like, let's analyze this. What about it feels this way? And, without pointing fingers and calling names, they'll give you the correct answer. And then I say, well, how can we fix this? And, and that question is either met with a bunch of suggestions or radio silence. And either one of those answers are totally fine, because what that does is open the floor for discussion for them to have amongst themselves. And if they can't have that discussion just yet, it's a totally teachable moment for us. Because that's what we're good at. That's playing to our strengths. That's when we can step in They've already analyzed the problems themselves. They just don't have the solution. Well, guess who does? You know, we can, from experience, we can show you and tell you how we can fix these minor problems. And then just like that, everything sounds a whole lot better. As people who grew up with this music, as people who love this music, I think playing to our strengths is kind of everything. And I think we're in this unique situation where, like, I mean, let's be honest, every single one of us, how much have we really grown up since middle school? Do you know what I mean?
Not at all.
You know what I mean? Like we become who we are in those years. You know, I still feel like the same person. You know, I still like the same things. Still have the same crazy sense of humor. And you know, so this is we're dealing with age groups that we can relate to. In that way, you know what I mean? And they feed off that energy. You know, it's not hard to get stoked about something you love, you know, and that energy is contagious.
It's funny you say that because, like, I think about you know, where I taught, all these kids were into heavy metal. That's so weird. I didn't tell them that I was into heavy metal, but all of a sudden they were. And then meanwhile, I can know other teachers that are like singer-songwriters, like all my kids love singer-songwriter music. And I'm like, we do like rub off on them because their personality comes out. Just to kind of answer the question from a little bit more of a holistic kind of where, you know, being a little bit out of the box and being in the role I've been for the last decade or so. I think the thing that I find is the largest barrier for people when they come in is thinking that just because we're doing music kids like or popular music, it's going to fix everything. Like, oh, I'm having trouble teaching orchestra and I'm having trouble teaching concert band, but if I teach the music kids like, it's yay. No, you have to be a teacher. You still have to know basic, important teaching things. You have to have classroom control. So, like, you know, my class, I know that the most important thing for any teacher is to not be afraid to fail. Just fail and learn from the mistakes you make. Everything I talk about when I run workshops are all mistakes I made at some point in my own teaching career. So I think that one of the things that, you know, I've learned through a bunch of failing is you know, you can't just like walk in and be like, all right, what do you guys want to do today? Okay, we'll do that. And unstructured time. Like I'm learning, okay, we're going to walk in. I've got something on the board. You guys are going to do this activity. I'm going to take roll. Okay, now we're going to review what we did before. Now we're going to play a song a couple times. We're going to work on it. It's not good enough just to, you know, to play it. We have to find out, like, how can we make it better? Ask their advice, use their ears. So once you kind of have structure like that, it makes it so much easier. But I do think that kind of not being afraid to learn from your mistakes is important. Like I know some teachers that were like, man, Despacito is the song and all the kids love it. We came back from summer. That's all they want to learn. 6 weeks later, well, we're going to play it in our concert in another 5 weeks, but the kids are sick of it. They don't want to do it anymore. And that's my entire syllabus. And I'm like, well, have you thought about changing your syllabus? I can't. I passed it out. You can change it. You can do whatever you want to do. Keep on changing and growing. And I think by that token also, when you think about just doing popular music, especially if your background isn't in it, the thing that I learned that was maybe the most valuable lesson is that music is in the eye of the beholder. There's no such thing as bad music, and there's no such thing as good music. There is only music as the students love it. I know I had some students that used to come in, you know, it was the early 2000s, to be like, hey, Burstein, have you checked out this new band? They're called Slipknot. You're going to love them. They're so cool. I'm like, that's trash, man. Listen to Metallica. That's good music. And, you know, what's the lesson the kid's getting from that? The kid's getting the lesson that I don't care about what they like. And my taste probably stinks. So why should they listen to me? Because they love this. And, you know, it took me a long time to recognize. And, you know, eventually some kid brought in some band and I finally listened to it. I can still remember the band was Opeth. And I listened and I was like, this is the most impressive thing I've ever heard. I love this. This is my life now. And it just made me realize, like, oh, their own opinions, that sometimes they can teach me something. And it just changed everything about my class because they started like respecting me more, and I respected because I respected them. And it just kind of grew to this place where I recognized, just because I've done all this studying of music in school for year after year, doesn't mean that I have all the answers. That's not how music works. That's not the beauty of music. I spend most of my time now playing music I don't enjoy. And I've learned that playing music I don't enjoy is way more fun for me than playing music I enjoy. Because when I play the music I enjoy, nobody cares. There'll be 3 guitar players out in the audience that are like, I could do that better than he can. And that's like the only people there when I'm playing my crazy, weird stuff. But when I'm playing songs other people are enjoying that maybe I don't because it's too poppy or whatever, I have a blast. I can be free with it. I see the enjoyment. You feel the vibe of the audience. So that's been a big lesson for me. And so that's why I love teaching music I don't know. I learn it, I figure it out, and it just makes for a much better experience for the kids and for myself.
With that, we conclude another episode of Education Through Music, the podcast. Thanks so much for listening. As always, we hope you'll review, subscribe, and share so others can tune in. To become a supporter and ensure more children have access to music education, please visit etmonline.org.